welcome to another episode of Splitting Hairs with Max and Nicky. As usual, I'm Max.
And I'm Nicky.
And together we're Max and Nicky.
This episode, we're going to talk about syntax and grammar and our preferred approaches to correct syntax and grammar.
Usage.
I mean, it's not even our approaches. It's what is the correct approaches, I mean, in general.
Well, I think what Nicky's trying to drive at is, obviously if you're speaking in common everyday tongue, your grammar is not going to be perfect and nobody cares really. But I guess what he's trying to say
is if you're going to attempt to speak correctly, then do it right. And I mean, I know Max is not as much as I am, but I'm kind of a stickler for when people use incorrect syntax or grammar
when they're attempting to
seem smart,
or when they're attempting to speak correctly.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just get right into it. I mean, the biggest offenders of that are people who say you and I as opposed to you and me when they mean to say you and me instead of you and I, or any variation on that, like he and I, or he and him and me. So an example would be
he's going to go to dinner with you and I,
right? Which is
incorrect.
And the correct way of saying that would be he's going to go to dinner with you and me. Because, I mean, I know this is just English 101, but if you're going to...
Basically, we're basically talking about our pet peeves.
So, right, or our pet peeves.
When it comes to
and I know this may
correctly.
seem sort of pretentious or something like that, but, as Fraser Crane once said, I don't do it to be popular.
Yeah, I know.
But
okay.
it's not even
it's
that.
Not
it's
about,
not even.
It's not about being pretentious.
It's not even about.
It's just more like the pet peeve lies within somebody that
is trying to seem pretentious,
or who seems a little pretentious by trying to be correct in their usage. But
so
then they come off as,
when people say he's going to dinner with you and I, that sounds like they're trying to use the correct form of using the word I. And it seems like they don't actually realize that the correct usage would be he's going to dinner with you and me. Because if you think about it, if you took out the you and the and, you wouldn't say he's going to dinner with I. You would say he's going to dinner with me. And it's just it's that simple. And that's English 101. And we all know it. But people try to sound smart or kind of...
They try to sound a little lofty.
Ignorant people.
They try to sound loftier.
They try to sound lofty by saying you and I, but it just comes across as ignorant, and they don't actually realize how kind of stupid they're sounding, actually, because they actually meant to say you and me. Now, I would much rather prefer them to always say you and me in any context, even if it's supposed to be you and I. If you're speaking in a conversation, I don't care if you're saying you and me, because that does sound more conversational.
To make it clear, we don't care.
Or even me and you, because, I'll say me and Max, I mean, the correct way of saying that would be Max and me, But
I know
it doesn't even matter.
We just want to just to make it clear again, we don't care when we're speaking colloquially, or we don't care about correct grammar on everyday language. It's just so happens when you're trying to speak correctly, we care about the correct usage.
Exactly. And so if you just use me all the time, even if it's not technically correct, I prefer that because it sounds more conversational, and it doesn't sound like you're trying to sound correct. It just seems more natural. Other things that bother me when people try to sound lofty or try to sound smart, pretentious, and they end up kind of coming across as less lofty or less smart is, and I know this sounds ignorant or this sounds pretentious in and of itself, but when people use the passive voice as opposed to the active voice, specifically in writing. Well, let me explain what the passive voice is and the active voice. Passive voice is
Passive. There's a very notorious example of it is Richard Nixon when he said mistakes were made. That's an example of passive voice. He basically was trying to evade blame, which is actually himself.
so he's
saying,
literally being passive about it.
Right.
He's not
taking responsibility, basically.
So if he were taking responsibility of it, he would say, "I made mistakes," and therefore he would be the subject that is doing the action, as opposed to the action being done by
Right.
something.
And so active voice would be, I made a mistake.
Exactly. And, people do this a lot in writing, in trying to attempt to sound smart in their writing. They'll say,
okay, go ahead.
Let me explain. They'll do things like, the basketball was brought by. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of something. The basketball was shot by the best player in the world. Instead of saying the best player in the world shot the basketball. I don't know. That's not a good example. But, people will say, it is said that one may not know the answer to life or something like that. But it is said that. Saying that sounds pretentious and not confident in what you're writing. A better way of saying that would be, nobody knows the answer to the meaning of life, or nobody knows the meaning of life. So it's actively taking responsibility for what you're writing. And again, it's not being shy when you use the passive voice, it makes you come across as not confident in what you're writing. In my opinion.
Basically, a theme amongst a few of our episodes is we don't like it when people show a lack of commitment. You should really be committed to what you're doing in anything, really,
in life. If you ever find yourself not committed fully, then perhaps you're in it for the wrong reason.
Now, by the way,
in anything in life,
just to go a little bit further on it, I do think, though, the passive voice can be good for certain things. If you're being diplomatic about something, you may want to use the passive voice, because having the active voice is a little bit too forward, and sometimes in a diplomatic situation, you want to smooth things over a little bit.
Hence Nixon saying mistakes were made.
No,
he's not trying to sound diplomatic, but
that's not a good example of using Nixon, because everyone knew it was his fault. He should have accepted responsibility. That was actually that's why I said it's a notorious example, because people, that was a bad. He shouldn't have done that. He should have. The gracious thing would have been to actually accept responsibility. I'm talking about maybe you're trying to smooth things over with somebody that maybe wronged you, but you actually are trying to take it upon yourself to smooth things over with them, and you're trying to not place blame on anyone. And it might be better to use the passive voice in certain situations, or if a diplomat, or even a diplomat, you could say trying to
feelings were hurt, and instead of I know I hurt your feelings.
No.
Sorry,
you always want to accept.
I know.
You could say, like, if you're saying you hurt my feelings, you do want to be open with somebody, but sometimes here's an example.
A way to not come across as so strong would be...
sometimes you might come off as being a little too much of a jerk or something. Or if you're negotiating, if countries are negotiating with each other, you want to be diplomatic about it. And so, using an active voice might seem a little too forceful in the negotiations, and the negotiation might not happen.
Instead of telling somebody, you hurt my feelings, you might want to say, well, my feelings were hurt. It's not exactly coming off so strong as placing blame on that person that hurt your feelings, but it does make them aware that your feelings were hurt, and you feel bad about a
They're
situation.
and then they're more likely to maybe empathize or sympathize.
Right, exactly.
Anyway, I don't know why we're we're explaining how it should be used.
Well, no,
but
I mean,
it,
hey,
you know.
no. But the point is, even if you choose after all this that you want to use the passive voice, especially when writing something that's going to be published or turned in class, an essay or article, make sure to remain consistent. If you're going to use the passive voice, use it for the whole article, use it for the whole essay. Don't switch off between active and passive voice. If you're going to use the active voice, on the contrary, is don't switch off and use the passive voice sometimes, because that also shows a lack of confidence, and it also makes the essay or article not flow very well.
This episode is sounding like a tutorial on how to write essays, or it just sounds like
I know, okay,
an English class or something.
right. But and anyway, so basically those are the kinds of things that annoy us with bad syntax and grammar. Although I do want to kind of just touch up on just a couple things that do annoy me, that do make me seem pretentious, but people are not aware of. I know this is a pet peeve for a lot of people, including me, is when people misuse the words "your" when they say.
You mean spell when they're spelling.
When they mean, especially in text messages, people do this a lot. They mean to use YOU''RE instead of YOUR. I know this is a common thing. Gotta say, it annoys me.
I know Nicky annoys Nicky. I'm not really annoyed by that because it's really an understandable mistake, actually. It really is. I mean, people are, they're human, they're fallible, that's not really a pet peeve for myself, Max. I just think
for me, Nicky, it is.
Especially in a text, you're writing fast, and it's like sometimes your head doesn't go there, and it's like you messed up.
I guess I don't know. And there's a couple of other ones like that, but they're not as big of a deal for me.
I would say like I can understand it more if it was something final that you wrote, like for you're advertising an event, you're advertising an event.
Here's the thing: is somebody that I know, they were going to put out. Granted, it was just an article, just for the internet, but it was a comedic piece for the internet, and they said "your" YOUR instead of YOU''RE in a sentence, and they meant to do YOU''RE, but by kind of publishing it on the internet and not looking it over, it makes me think that that person didn't realize, and that is a pet peeve of mine. When people don't
it's
even
not that.
realize,
I think it's more of
laziness too.
It's again, lack of commitment to your work. I think you should really always look it over before, if you're publishing something, and whatever you're doing, if you take it seriously, show commitment.
And there's actually a very popular book right now. It's going to be made into a movie. I guess I'm not going to name the title of it, but it takes place in the near future, and Steven Spielberg's making a movie out of it. And you look at this book, and I've read the first chapter of it, and there are so many just grammar, syntax, spelling errors in it. And it's almost as if, was there an editor for this book? And it makes me think that there was not enough commitment put into this work that has become really popular.
Maybe in the near future, people won't look. They don't care about syntax as much.
I guess not. It was really annoying.
Kidding,
it was like, gosh, I could have done a better job at editing this, thing that is a New York Times bestseller than the person that actually edited it. It was frustrating. Anyway, the point of all this is, if you're writing or speaking in any context, don't try to come across as smart or intelligent by actually using the wrong syntax or grammar. Don't attempt to sound smart, and then if you don't actually know the actual rules, of grammar, of correct syntax and grammar. What you should be doing is just speak how you normally would speak, write how you would normally write if it's just a casual situation. And people won't think you're ignorant or anything like that, or I won't think you're ignorant. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know.
I suppose
Maybe you can put that in
I guess what
better
Nicky's
way.
just trying to say is that, just be yourself. That's just the best way to
Be
be.
yourself and commit to yourself.
Right.
In however way you would naturally speak, in however way you would naturally write.
Well, I mean, the writing part, actually, that's a different story.
That's a different story. But especially when
right,
you're
if you're-
speaking,
Unless you're adhering to a specific style while writing, you should adhere then to the correct usage of syntax and grammar.
right.
And that's, I would say, is the final word, right?
Once again, my name is Nicky,
And I'm Max.
and this is Splitting Hairs with Max and Nicky. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.